Hi, I'm Riivo Talviste from Cybernetica from Estonia, and I'm going to talk about the practical deployment of secure multi-party computation technology for studying large-scale data sets. And a little bit unconventionally, I'm going to start with a figure. So here, on these bars, you can see the number of ICT students enrolled in university ICT curriculums from 2006 to 2012. And at the same time, the orange line shows the number of ICT students who had already quit their studies by the end of 2012. So on average, about 43% of students enrolled in ICT curriculums in Estonia during this period had quit their studies before 2013 already. So this is a problem. At the same time, we know that ICT students are, a lot of ICT students are working during their studies already. And naturally, universities blame IT companies because they are employing ICT students really early on, so they are afraid that students do not have the time or motivation to graduate on time or graduate at all. And of course, we set out to figure out if this was really the case. So you can immediately notice that we actually already have the necessary data to answer this question. On one hand, we have the education records from the Ministry of Education and Research, and although we do not have income records for individuals, we do have tax records, and for private persons, we can more or less deduce their income based on their tax data. And this data is held by the Estonian Tax and Customs Board. So what we can do, we can take the two data sets, combine them, and then let professional data analysts do their work and answer questions like if and how much working during the studies affects one graduating on time or later career or something like that. However, this is a privacy conference, and we all know that we can't actually combine these data sets into central database like this. Because both of these data sets contain private sensitive information, which means that this kind of combining is prohibited by the Personal Data Protection Act or similar legislation. And furthermore, tax data, the secrecy of tax data is actually protected by the Taxation Act. And even if we somehow could or would be allowed to put those two data sets in one central database to analyze it, this central database would immediately become a really attractive target for all kinds of attackers, both attackers from the outside, like hackers, as well as insider attackers. For example, like maybe a little bit too nosy analysts or malicious database administrators who by definition have access to the database. So what we did, we solved the problem by employing secure multi-party computation technology, and to be exact, we used the ShareMind secure multi-party computation platform. So on the left side, we have the same input sources, the Ministry of Education and Research and Tax and Customs Board, but in this scenario, they actually do not send their data sets to the central database. What they do is that they take each of their individual values, secret share those into random-looking pieces, and then distribute those pieces among the free computation parties in the center. So here are the computation parties. The role of the free computation parties in this deployment were played by first the Estonian Information System Authority, which is a government institution overseeing and managing all of the state information systems. Then the IT department of the Ministry of Finance, which is actually also the IT department for the Tax and Customs Board, which meant that the Tax and Customs Board actually had a really tight control throughout this analysis process. And finally, us, Cybernetica, as the technology provider. The analysis itself was carried out by professional statisticians from the Center of Applied Research, and they were using a statistical analysis tool called RMind that I will briefly talk about in a couple of moments. So for the time limits, I can't get into much details here. So if you have any questions about the deployment, then feel free to find me today or tomorrow. Anyway, to pull this kind of deployment off, there were a lot of procedures that we had to follow. And actually, I think this slide should belong to our parallel session of human factors, actually. But here it is. So first, before the actual study took place, we talked to the Estonian Data Protection Authority. We introduced them to the secure multi-party computation technology and how we were going to use it in this particular study. And after long internal discussion, they finally concluded that secret sharing can be thought as a form of encryption, which means that secure multi-party computation can be then thought as a computation on encrypted data. And since the whole analysis is done using secure multi-computation, then it means that we are only analyzing data in encrypted form, so we are actually not processing private information. So for this particular study, they concluded that we actually do not need their explicit agreement to carry on with the study, which is actually a really good result in this context. Next, as the Tax and Customs Board was the source of the most sensitive data, the tax data in this study, then they wanted to conduct a code review on the ShareMind implementation. And this code review was carried out by, again, the IT department of Ministry of Finance. And they concluded that ShareMind is, well, basically a nicely written piece of software that that keeps like the best practices of modern software development in mind. And finally, although we used technical measures of secure multi-party computation, the two input parties and free computation parties also signed a contract where basically the computation parties said that they will behave according to the protocol, they won't collude or share data with each other, and on a specific date, they will delete all of the shares that they have in their possession. So as for the technical procedures, it's important to notice that all of the parties involved in the deployment deployed ShareMind components themselves. And this is true not only for the computation parties, but also for the two input parties and the result party, the statisticians. So as the ShareMind components basically communicate with each other over TLS channels, then all of each party needed a public key crypto key pair, which they generated themselves. And the public keys were exchanged with each other by signing them with Estonian ID card. So in a sense, we bootstrapped the trust relationships in this deployment on our national public key infrastructure that we already have in place. Now to the most difficult and time-consuming part of the whole study, and this is actually the data transformation phase, which data scientists refer to as extract, transform, and load. And why we even need this kind of step is because the input sources have the data in their operational databases. And this is and these are the data sets that they were importing into the ShareMind deployment. However, the data models used for operational data sets are not usually really good for analyzing, so we need to do all kind of transformations on the data, like aggregation and joining and some shifting and so on. So this was the most difficult part of the process, actually. The data transformation process, as well as the rest of the analysis, was actually carried out using a statistical analysis tool called RMind, which is modeled after popular open source statistical suite called R. So RMind tries to be as similar to R by using the same language syntax and same function names. However, it is important to keep in mind that RMind is just a user interface, just a command line, and all of the operations are actually carried out by the free computation parties using secure computation. And RMind includes most of the statistical functionality that you would expect, like aggregating, sorting, joining databases, linear regressions, and so on and so on. As for the size of the data itself, the study included students that have graduated between 2006 and 2012. So we got about 600,000 education records from the Ministry of Education and Research, and a bit over 10 million tax records from the Tax and Customs Board. Like I said, this data transformation phase was actually the hardest part of the whole study, so it took quite some time. It took about 380 hours over the public internet. However, after the actual study had finished, we found some additional bottlenecks in both the analysis scripts as well as the secure multi-party computation protocols themselves, and we optimized them a bit more. So now, for the same amount of data and over the public internet, we can do the same process in about 6 hours and 15 minutes. So yeah, it's a bit better now. And finally, here's a little very short overview of the results that we got. So the statisticians found that yes, truly, the nominal graduation rate of all the curriculums in Estonia is just about 40%, which is low. But that things are really, really bad for ICT curriculums, where this figure is just about 20%, which is really, really bad. However, if you look at the figure here, then on the left side, you can see the non-ICT curriculums. And on the right side, you can see the ICT curriculums. And the lines show the percentage of working students during first, second, and third year of their bachelor studies. And there is no way we can say that ICT students are working more than non-ICT students based on those two graphs. So the reason why ICT students are dropping out more has to be something else, or something at least additional to this fact than just working during their studies. And with this result, I'd like to conclude. So thank you for your attention.